Lights out.
Hey, welcome everybody once again for another fabulous episode of SleepTech Talk, the sleep podcast for sleep technologists, sleep physicians, sleep whatever. Hey, we're here for you with your hosts, Emerson Kerr, Robert Miller, and me, Jerry, the guy with the gaming chair. Anyway, that's an old joke, but that's because this is episode 2. And before I say any more, Emerson, if you could just take it away, please.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jerry. We're so glad to have our part 2 with Soda Kuczkowski, Buffalo, New York, a great friend and just an inspiration. You know, if you heard the first episode, a lot of passion, a lot of great experience. And, you know, if there's one thing I think that captures Soda, what she's doing, it is passion for sleep. And, you know, I think that as we go to the next few minutes, it's understanding, you know, what can the sleep technologists do and where can they live? Because you're a certified sleep coach, Soda, and, you know, there's a story there. You know, you went through a process of getting educated, building that up. You know, a lot of in our audience are exploring, you know, even a CCSH. So when you think of these kinds of credentials, you know, why does that matter? What process do you have? Because I know it's a little bit different than what most might think, but if you could kind of take us through that story, because this is something that you care deeply about.
Well, I mean, in terms of my own education, you know, coming from the sleep medicine sector and being more like on the clinical end, you know, with physicians' offices, it's more about statistics and data. It's more about reactive healthcare. The reason that I pursued the education that I did as a certified sleep coach is I wanted to be more on those preventative end, preventative services. You talked about getting, you know, paid for sleep education in the practice model. It's amazing to me, I should say it's shocking to me, that diabetic education, I think, has been paid for the last maybe 6 or 7 years. They've been paying for diabetic education, but sleep services haven't made them the way into the practice model. And there is such an opportunity there. Like for sleep technologists with this CCSH, you know, certification, looking at this and the way that it's being kind of modeled, because I've attended, you know, I attended the very first conference in Florida. I think it was 7 years ago that they first started this, and I've gone to sequential conferences after that in regards to this. I myself was going to sit for that exam, and then I didn't, because when you look at the type of education that's covered in it, and it's still very clinical in nature, right? So on the public health end front, there isn't as much of that sleep health education component, but where there is that education component and that opportunity is to be like these sleep navigators or liaisons or coordinators within practice models, right? So helping, so instead of having like a medical assistant or, nurse practitioner or PA doing screeners on patients, having these sleep individuals in the practice that are able to talk about the symptoms, the risks, and kind of go a little bit into that kind of like hygiene and then understand those statistically the risks. Because a lot of times if you go into the traditional model, you know, they don't know necessarily how sleep disorders correlate to diabetes or hypertension or cardiovascular disease, but it's very relevant. And with the CCSH credential, you have all of that experience, right? For me, front facing to the public, I wanted to transform science into meaningful action. So I want to take it to its simplest form. So it's like, I wanted to be more on that preventative end, but that's a way that could be kind of a pathway. Kind of like what I mentioned, because I'm in New York State, it's very different than it is in some of the other states. But, you know, going into hospitals and going into respiratory departments and kind of creating these kind of divisions, maybe not putting a lab within the hospital, but the opportunities with home sleep testing to have someone like that be a navigator within the hospital model and be educated in that field, right? Because sleep, there is so much information to know about sleep. Someone going to a conference or getting like a short certification, you know, I'm an instructor for a certification program. There's an application process. You have to get reference. We have to know like your education, what area you want to work in. And it's a year-long process. And then you also have to work with a number of clients before you can get certified in this field. But there's a lot of things that are out there that are very short. Even with the CCSH, they have a conference and you can, you know, study for the exam and so forth. But really that continuing ed model, I think, is going to be really important in helping people understand all of the pockets that are available within this field of sleep. Because everyone doesn't have to follow the same pathway. There are numerous opportunities in this field. You know, you can be specialized working in an endocrinologist's office, right? Versus working in a primary care office. Those are going to be different types of navigators, right? Because you can specialize in a certain type of patient base and helping them understand how treating their sleep disorder or improving their sleep habits and their lifestyle, behavioral patterns around sleep are going to really make an impact on their quality of life.
So just during the break, you talked a little bit about your passion for helping sleep techs understand what are the different pathways they could take. Could you talk a little bit more about that? Obviously, you spoke a little bit right now, but if you could expound on that, please.
Well, like I mentioned, I mean, working respectively within different specialties, right? Working within hospitals, working in the public sector. I mean, with a lot of these home testing devices, I know initially it seemed like a threat to the field because obviously, like, if sleep labs are closing or they're replacing, a lot of their locations or their beds with these HSTs, right? And people are able to do it in the comfort of their home. But if you think about a lot of these companies, even though we have more technology and more things that are in the sleep space than we ever have, we've never had a bigger sleep problem. The sleep problem is bigger than it's ever been. With all of the solutions that are available, from products to wearables to all these different things to education that's accessible online, we have a bigger sleep problem than we've ever had. And that comes down to the fact that people are making generalizations and they think that any sleep product works for them. Sleep technicians can actually help with the home testing model, right? They're the most qualified to be the sleep coaches. I tell people all the time, they're like, I have this wearable information, wearable device and this information, and they completely misread what they're being told, right? They don't understand what healthy sleep patterns look like. If you're sleeping from 2 a.m., right, until 9 a.m. Is that healthy? No, we're not. We're missing that deep sleep, right? We want to get to bed a little bit earlier. So it's like helping them understand and educate them about the things that are important when it comes to those types of devices. So I think opportunities are endless. Some of the biggest that I see are in, I know they're coming up with a pediatric certification. Maternal health is one of the most important. There aren't support services in hospitals for maternal health. Nurse training, right, for that type of thing. That, again, that first responders and those protective services, corporate wellness initiatives, but also in schools. When I do school programs, I don't just talk about sleep health education. I actually talk about STEM careers in sleep, and I try to get them excited. I'm like, you can invent the next sleep product. Like, you can get into making, a new type of CPAP machine, right? A new type of device. Like, there's technology, there's engineering, science, math. There's so much that goes into that, but it's not something that we're trying to develop in our young population to get them excited about entering into this field and all the opportunities it presents.
That is so cool. I mean, you don't hear that at all. The fact that, hey, you can start so young, and then, sleep medicine does not necessarily always have to mean sticking electrodes. I mean, all of us here have done that, sticking electrodes on somebody's head or on their legs. It could be developing a new product, and I just love that, connecting that with STEM. I've never heard anybody talk about that before.
What's so important, if you think about, with schools, I go in and I'll talk about like athletes, right? So I'm like, what's your favorite sports team? A lot of teams, whether, they're baseball, football, basketball, they're now enlisting sleep coaches, right? It used to be that you wanted a personal trainer, a nutritional, a physical therapist, sleep coaches, because you want that circadian optimization, right? What better than a sleep technician who understands sleep patterns to go in to be able to help that individual, right? Because we know that we have different types of chronotypes, right? So it's understanding that science. Those are the type of individuals that we need in those types of spaces.
So one of the things you talked to me about, Soda, was tools. As you think about these groups that you're reaching, you have tools that you work with. You developed some of these. What does that look like? What are some of the educational tools and processes you exercise and utilize to accomplish these goals?
Right. So even though I have a retail boutique, all of the tools are curated here, so I don't carry a lot of products. And when people come in, I tell them that the tools are to support the education. So if I have someone who they can't get away from scrolling on their phone, we have a teenager, right? They're not going to turn off their phone. We can have them put on a pair of blue blockers, therefore creating that kind of division, right? And we're creating healthy habits, not restrictions. We're not constantly telling people what they can't do. That's one of the first kind of ways for, facing the public in terms of helping to engage them in meaningful conversations, is empowering them. the way that the healthcare system is currently set up, it's just very disempowering, right? Like it's very negative. We are always being told that we're doing the wrong thing. Statistically, there's a number of things that can happen. I mean, we know that regardless of working out, if you're not a smoker and all these different things, if you're only sleeping, 4 hours of sleep per night, it's going to compromise your heart health, right? But the American Heart Association, despite me being a speaker for 4 years in a row, has not added it to their little wheel. I keep telling them, I'm like, there's not 7, there's 8. You need to add sleep to that because it's so important.
Hey, I agree with that. Who has 7 slices of pizza on their pizza? It's always got to be an even number, right? So it makes.
Well, they talk about everything else with it. I mean, what we eat, our nutrition supports a healthy sleep cycle, right? Getting the right amount of physical activity helps to induce deeper sleep, right? So our body sleeps that much deeper. It's all connected. Everything is connected.
And then what do you say to people that promote this hustle lifestyle that you only need 4 hours of sleep or 5 hours of sleep?
I tell them that sleep is the new hustle. Sleep is the investment you need to be effective tomorrow. If you want to be sharper, if you want to be more creative, especially like my entrepreneurs, you want to be focused, creative, innovative. You want to make good decisions. You want to treat people well. You want to treat yourself well. That comes from getting a good night's sleep. That right there is the foundation for everything that you're trying to do. Like I had mentioned, it's a catalyst for that personal and professional goals. If you sleep well, anyone who's successful, if you look at their schedule, they'll tell you that even if they are sleeping that shorter amount of time, that 6 hours, we know that under 6 hours, a number of things can happen, right? But they're prioritizing that. When people ask me, Soda, what's your best sleep tip? I say, prioritize it. What does that look like for you? That's the number one sleep tip. It's not a supplement. It's not all these other things. It's prioritizing it.
Hey, Soda, I'm taking notes, by the way, so that we can trademark some of these.
Oh, my little taglines.
Like, sleep is the new hustle.
I actually have all my marketing campaigns framed behind me. I love, using these little quirky things to kind of engage people. I have some fun signs in my shop. And you had mentioned about insurance earlier. It is pay out of pocket, but I am in with Independent Health and Blue Cross Blue Shield with their wellness card, so people can use that and their FSA, HSA to purchase items in my shop. We do restorative yoga classes, so those are covered under that as well. It is out of pocket, but we're seeing a lot more individuals that are investing in that. I get a number of, not only the sleep physicians that send me, clients, but I have psychologists, mental health centers locally, primary care offices, like, especially in that medical end, in the sleep medicine end, if they come in and they're, negative for sleep apnea, they might give them, some different hygiene tips, but most often they're going to send them to me because they understand the work. When it comes to being a coach, my job is to support and is to educate you, but it's also to help you identify those blind spots. I might be helping you put together an action plan, but it really comes from you identifying what are the things that you're doing in your life that are hindering your ability to sleep well.
So you have covered brilliantly, wellness and sort of performance, the performance aspect of sleep, but, sort of moving a little bit more on the clinical side, would your business also include a patient who maybe on CPAP therapy, having some issues, and really a lot of the same tools that you're using to drive that, increased performance and increased wellness could be utilized for a patient who's going through really a little bit more of a medical, from a medical perspective, trying to get and accomplish what they're looking for from a therapeutic standpoint, from a clinical treatment.
Absolutely. As I mentioned, I work with durable medical equipment companies, dentists who make oral appliances. And the thing is, even though CPAP is kind of the gold standard and we have these therapies that are available, it is not a standalone. If you do not have good sleep habits, or you're making, lifestyle behavioral choices that are going to hinder your ability, then, you're not going to see as much success with it. So I work in tandem with that, helping them understand that, even with sleep apnea, right, some of the foods that you eat could create, more of an issue in terms of snoring at night, right? So what does that look like? Can create issues with acid reflux. So it's really talking to them about all those other pieces, so that it's a complete plan for sleep, because it isn't a standalone.
So Soda, let's imagine we walk into your store there in Buffalo, your boutique, and I just want to buy something. I'm going to come in and buy this thing. Is that possible?
So Emerson loves this. We were talking yesterday, and I told him that when someone comes in, instead of asking someone what their sleep challenge is, I ask them what their goal is. If they come in and they present and they say, I'm waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning and so forth, like, what is your goal, right? You think that it would be like, oh, well, I don't want to wake up at night anymore. They'll say, I want the energy to do this. You have to meet people where they're at. And when I open my shop, I'm very mindful of that. So when people come in, they have to talk to me. It's like a little mini education session that I give them. And I will only sell them tools that I feel work with the challenge, to help to address what they're looking for, to help to support, those lifestyle and behavioral changes. So I won't just sell any product to anyone. Like I have a sprayable, I think it's a melatonin spray for people who travel a lot. I won't sell that. One thing I talk about a lot with melatonin, it's, sold everywhere. It's misused. It's misunderstood. There's a place for it, but the place is also under the care of a medical professional, right? So if you have someone or a physician that you're working with and you have shift work and they've identified that that's something that might be good for you, then that's a conversation that we can have, but I don't just sell anything to anyone. I think that's important.
So we're running out of time here, and again, can't appreciate your passion enough. But do you have anything else to add for the sleep techs out there that are looking for their way or trying to figure out how do they build on their passion?
Absolutely. I would look at why you decided to study in that field to begin with. What was it that interested you the most? And then look at, if you're still working in a lab setting, what are the things that interest you the most about your position, right? Everyone is motivated by different things, but everyone's a different type of learner as well, right? What do you find yourself kind of resonated to? Like, what are the things that you find yourself looking at, right? Because that's what's your passion is, the things that you do in your downtime. That's how I know that sleep is mine. And it's really looking at, what brought them to that to begin with. And then figuring out, like, do they tend to speak to certain types of patients about things because they're really interested in like cardiovascular health, or, for instance, I work for a sleep lab. There was a technician she was someone who was into marathons. She was very physically fit. So the physical recovery end of sleep was very important to her. When someone came in, because people really think that sleep apnea is these middle-aged, overweight men, and we see it in women, right? It has more to do with structure, your jaw. We see it in thinner individuals. We see it in very fit individuals, right? Because we have very more narrow jaws. Our cheeks aren't as wide as they used to be. Our airway is closing. We have overbites. This is why that pediatric sleep certification is really important, because a lot of what we're seeing in adult, like these chronic conditions that are in the adult population are trickling into our pediatric population. You had mentioned about why I opened my business here. We have a high rate of obesity and diabetes in young children in this area. So that is, that speaks to our lack of public health and the lack of education that is available or accessible to individuals, right? Just because it's online doesn't mean that it's meeting it in the classroom or being recognized in the community in the way that it needs to be. It needs to be inserted into people's lives in order for them to really apply it.
Soda, thank you so much. I mean, to hear your passion and not just passion for sleep in general, but also for the public. I mean, as a physician myself, to hear you talk about preventive medicine, that's so overlooked, and that's very exciting for me to hear. And also how you want to foster the field in children to grow up and to continue to do this, as well as the professionals that are in it right now. It was very refreshing to hear that. So, but we are out of time. Just want to say thank you so much for joining us on behalf of all of us here on the podcast, and all our listeners and viewers. I want to say thank you so much for joining us once again. And everybody out there, cheers, lights on.